Good evening, everyone, and this is my joy, my pleasure, and tonight a little bit of my frustration. but we're glad to be here. This is me, Bishop John Seldis, and welcome to Relevant Conversations. This platform, this particular segment of the platform, we spend time doing a little bit of what I still get a great deal of enthusiasm and excitement, at least from my perspective, is to talk to my friends, my colleagues, those who are in the work. And listen, we were just trying to figure this out. This powerful, dynamic woman in ministry, I'm known for I don't know how many years. We were trying to figure it out. I can tell you that we probably encountered one another, can I say it's been at least half our lifetime ago. I said that way. We've known each other a really long time. Listen, let me tell you a little bit about who she is, and then I'll invite her to the platform. And we're praying that this technology would allow us to have this conversation. Let's do it like that. Let's just get our spiritual energy headed, and the vibration headed in one direction. She hails from let me say Charleston, South Carolina, but really she from them barrier islands. She one of them people. We would call it Geechee people. She's one of those folk who are down from where most of us journeyed to North America, using the port of entry as enslaved Africans. And I have gotten to know a little bit about her family and her journey. Went to school, got some education, and served at the national setting of the United Church of Christ, and now holds the position as one. Let me count. 11, 12, 13th, 14th. I don't know. But she is now the executive director of the Community Renewal Society, an organization that for a pretty long time, I guess it's been 100 years, right, or a bit more, doing all kinds of work in and around the city of Chicago, and nationally and globally. Her presence and her witness has been felt. And let me just bring her on, and she can tell you more about what it is that she's up to and what she's been up to. Let me bring to this platform for the first time, and I'm privileged and pleased to do so, the Reverend Dr. Waltrina Middleton. Come on in here and greet the people.
Hello, good to be with you.
All righty. So did I get that right? You from South Carolina originally?
Yes, Youngs Island, South Carolina. It's right shy of Charleston, right on the outskirts.
So it's one of the barrier islands of South Carolina, correct?
It's one of the Gullah communities, right outside of Charleston. Yes.
All right. And then you've spent a lot of time in Chicago. You've been a member of Trinity United Church of Christ under the leadership of Baba Wright, Pastor Wright, and all of that. But let's go back. Let's go back. I think we met when you were actually in Chicago going to school. I think that's when we met, before I arrived, I think, in Chicago. I was a staff person under Mama Yvonne Delk at the Community Renewal Society. I had I joined that staff, and I had the experience of having joy every time I came to the office. It was a dynamic, inspiring, movers and shakers and folk doing what they do in the city of Chicago and all over the country. Mommy Yvonne would say, "Son, come on in here," and my office was right next to hers at that time, and she conspired for something for me to do, and then I went to do it, and I had a great experience of ministry with Mama Yvonne at the Community Renewal Society. Could you talk a little bit about the Community Renewal Society and the work it has done historically? And then I want to pivot to how you have envisioned the work as it has moved forward since my leaving there, almost 30 years ago.
Yes, Community Renewal Society is more than a century-old organization, as you shared, just knocking on the door of 140 years. And it was established through missionary work and an endowment that was dedicated at that time to addressing, ironically, some of the issues that we're seeing and facing now: immigration, and helping folks that are new neighbors be able to not only establish themselves but also to address some of the racial injustices and discrimination that they were facing in the Asian community and beyond initially. Over the course of time, depending on the leadership, his focus may have shifted. You mentioned Dr. Yvonne Delk, who is the trailblazer within her own right, and just a brilliant and phenomenal person in the 1990s. She matriculated into the role as the executive director, the first person of color, as well as the first woman to serve in the role. Since then, there have been only 3 total that have served. And she had the vision of recentering the mission so that it would include organizing and policy arms that address the current issues of racial injustice as well as socioeconomic disparities in present day. She definitely was prophetic in having that foresight because just a little more than a decade later, a young man would be shot to death by the Chicago police, and Laquan McDonald is his name. And because of the structure that she helped to lay the foundation for, it positioned the organization to be able to be a leader and a voice in not only protesting and demonstrating or illustrating grassroots organizing, and also addressing policy issues that could try to, we hope, prevent another innocent life from being taken due to police brutality and excessive force. But it had the audacity to sue the city and also, I believe, create a blueprint for the nation in terms of consent decree efforts to hold those police officers accountable. And so now we see consent decrees all over the nation. But what is so unique about ours is the fact that it is citizen-led, and being able to establish and enforce those policies come through the citizens of Chicago. And so over the course of this time, we've gone from immigration, migrant rights and advocacy to police accountability to adjust housing to ensure that there's not discrimination when a person is no longer in the prison industrial complex. But also in recent years, become more engaged with addressing inclusivity from LGBTQIA plus community. And we've come full circle because in this administration, where we're witnessing violence and profiling against new neighbors, we have become re-engaged on those very issues that was a part of our roots, and contributing community impact funds to make sure that people are not unhoused, and also to ensure that we support grassroots organizations that are direct service to communities that are newly arriving here. And that includes not only the Latinx community, but also communities from the African continent and the Caribbean and beyond. And so there's a lot that connects us with our roots and our past, and we are continuing to forge our way into the calls for human rights today.
The Community Renewal Society got its beginning, what you're referencing, got its beginning as it was responding to those immigrants that were coming into urban America and specifically Chicago. However, those kinds of some were called settlement houses or other mission societies that our four parents of faith organized themselves around these city mission societies, etc. And there were a number of them throughout the East and the Northeast and the Midwest. 100 years ago, we have one of those organizations here in Hartford, and we were sister organizations. So I had heard when I joined the Community Renewal Society, I knew about the Boston Mission Society and the Christian what they called Christian Activities Council was the name of the organization and that was here. And these groups and organizations that really rallied around the immigrant population, these migrant or immigrant populations and their needs. I mean, doing what we now call, in social service language, wraparound services, right? Literally those who needed, housing, they needed food, they needed clothes, shelter, and then it moved to education. So 100 years ago, here in Hartford, 120, 30 years ago in Hartford, they started Sunday schools. Those Sunday schools became schools, education. Here in Hartford, these organizations, they started the YMCA and YWCA movement. They were partners with those organizations. They helped found what we now call, they used to be called orphanages, right? Children's services, as it were. In fact, they even helped start the Children's Hospital here, and there's the legacy of that happened in Chicago as well. So these organizations, I tell people all the time that the church and religious communities help. The government didn't start doing that kind of work. It was faith folk who rallied themselves around responding to the needs of the folk on the ground in community. And so you carry on as leader that legacy, and I'm happy to hear that work has continued in specific ways around consent decrees and all of the various things that are happening. Listen, Chicago has been in the news, for how it has been impacted by the move of our federal government in the so-called responding to immigrants and migrants. Have you all been involved in that work in Chicago? And if so, in what kinds of specific ways have you responded to this current movement and moment?
In this current movement and moment, we're very blessed by the leadership of our mayor, Brandon Johnson, who has been very vocal and just very outspoken against some of the injustices imposed by this executive administration, and also being very innovative in terms of resistance, and while we're not always in agreement, he's been very intentional about working with organizers and grassroots organizations to rally together, to work together. And it's quite interesting to see how there's some coming together in the city where there's often isolation and divide, as we work together to dismantle some of these policies, etc. Um, One recent act, the United States had removed its membership from the World Health Organization, and the state of Illinois, alongside the city of Chicago, um, have joined and found membership. Community Renewal Society has done the same. We joined one of the World Health Organization committees, subcommittees, so that we are in solidarity with our city and state, as well as recognizing, when we talk about the new communities, new neighbors coming in, but also the impact on health disparities on our communities. It's essential that we are able to obtain information and knowledge about what's happening in the world that could affect our community, our city. Um, how does that affect folks who do not have the resources to gain access to health care? And that directly impacts our new neighbors, and communities that are working class and so forth, that may have challenges gaining access, may not have insurance, and he's making it even more difficult for folks to have health access to health care. Um, and so by joining World Health Organization, we're able to have access to some of that information and be in the forefront in raising awareness, and also to be in better position to support those communities that are directly impacted and in need. We certainly have participated in the No King Days rallies. CRS has been rally speakers and marched, but we're also trying to find other ways outside of marching, just to make sure that we are kind of filling in the gap where um, funding has been removed through what we call community impact grants that support organizations that provide housing, that provide education to daycares, congregations, and, and other spaces that may not know what are their rights and how they can stand up to these so-called ICE enforcers. Um, and so education has really been our primary focus, as well as recognizing that we may not be able to do everything, but there are some organizations where this is their expertise, that provide legal aid, for example. That's certainly not our area, but they need volunteers, or they may need resources. So we do provide support to ensure that those who are expert in these respective areas are able to continue to move forward with their work. Um, in addition to joining in solidarity in the streets when we are called, participating in some of those anti movements, if you will, to like joining who.
I understand. You have had background with doing work and ministry with youth and young adults in particular. You for those who don't know, I serve and you've served in the United Church of Christ, and you spent a considerable amount of time helping to really, shape our national youth events over a period of time, and where we would come together from across the country and have our young people be involved. Could you talk a little bit about that work, and then how, and in fact, in this current moment, how you are doing that kind of mentoring with CRS? Yeah.
It was not an easy time being in a national setting as a Black woman, trying to lead, trying to be innovative. It wasn't always a joyful or healthy experience. It certainly wasn't as I was exiting, for sure. But during the time I was there, I was very grateful for the opportunities I had to encounter youth and young adults, and I felt very privileged to be able to serve alongside them, to host, as you noted, the National Youth Event, but also the youth component at General Synod, and also to support our conferences, local congregations, or wherever I was invited to be able to provide support. Mentorship was something that's really important to me, but also just simply being accessible and to listen. And I think that was the success of the National Youth Event. There were certainly many others who came before me, and I recognize their hard work and leadership in the ways that they helped to make it possible for me to come enter into that role. But I think what was specifically unique regarding the time I served was being able to step back from what has been tradition and really listen to an emerging generation that articulated here we're concerned about our peers being killed um, in the classroom. There was a significant number of shootings that were occurring, including in Newtown, that for my first youth at General Synod. And what we did there, we did a lot of things that I thought was pretty phenomenal. But one was to have a vigil. We had over 300 classroom chairs or desks set up in the convention hall with the name and the age of a child from in the U.S. who was killed due to the culture of violence, and which at that time was um, gun violence. Um, we also had a whole exhibit that walked folks through some of the challenges that young people face due to the culture of violence. And the theme at that time was God, I can't remember, it was like a God's purpose or something like that. I can't remember. But we turned it from a statement to a question um, with all of the names and just showing all around the country that children were dying. And it was the youth led that space. That was also the first synod where, for not just youth, but period, where we had gender neutral and non-conforming restrooms because we listened to the youth. And after that synod, and that was just in the youth area, but the very next one in the general synod area, they had the same. So we constantly pushed against the grain, challenged the status quo, and made sure that youth were not in the backdrop, but were a center point in the witness of the ministry of this denomination. We refused to be in a basement. We wanted to have an integral part in the convention space, and we did. And that carried over with the National Youth Event, where we actually, for many years, there were nearly 4,000 youth. So we were larger than the General Synod, but we had the smallest budget. We didn't always have the same support. And so, we challenged the leaders, the officers, to invest in the youth program as the largest convening of the denomination by ensuring that it had a budget that reflected that truth, that reality. And so we were able to, I believe, have very meaningful, transformative, and powerful youth-led gathering with speakers from around the country and world. We nationalized and globalized National Youth Event. Um, we had a young speaker that spoke out against the violence against young women who were pursuing their education in some countries. We had national figure from Dancing with the Stars, but we also brought in folks who were making an impact every day in the life of the UCC. So we were able to build a bridge where the youth were front and center, where worship was front and center, where social justice was front and center. And we made that connection with the local and national setting, but also the global community.
Thank you for sharing. I know a lot of that history, and I was there during your tenure in leadership there. I wanted to raise that because I think as you assumed leadership with the Community Renewal Society, some of that played into, or at least that experience helped to establish some ways of being in Chicago. And I'll say I'll say it like this: your predecessors took gun violence and violence, urban violence in particular, took it seriously, and I think you lifted it to a whole nother level when CRS supported Black Lives Matter, and in fact got involved not only in the national witness, but also got involved in the local witness that has led to what you all have done with police accountability. And you mentioned the federal consent decrees, and a number of us in our local areas took on and established that kind of with CRS actually leading and being a moral voice on that kind of stuff. Could you talk a little bit more about the way you all at CRS and have helped to structure the citywide coalition and building the constituencies that you all have helped to bring together, and how you all think about how you help communities build capacities to take on the work for themselves. Instead, it's not the do for, it's the how do we come alongside and share the work with.
Yeah, there are a lot of powerful and beautiful coalitions that preceded CRS, that have helped to work alongside CRS. And so the coalition, the beauty of the coalition is being able to find that common ground and unity, and basically demanding that the citizens of Chicago are directly engaged in policy making and decisions that's imposed by the city, and the council, city council, and the like. And there are different groups, and sometimes we do come together. The Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability is the coalition group, or also called GAPA, that CRS is a part of, and that was the coalition that came together collectively to sue the city um, following the murder of Laquan McDonald, and also and to your note, to form the consent decree. But there are certainly others, and while we may not be a part of those coalitions, we still respect their advocacy. And as a result of us coming together, I think another um, group, we all came together, we were able to create the ECPS, which is another platform with police accountability that comes from the community. And as a result of that, Mayor Lightfoot, on her way out, had to endorse it, because there was no fraction between us. We were all unified. And I also think that because of that unity, we were able to demonstrate or illustrate to candidates, including the current mayor, the importance of working alongside the community for success. Um, and like I said, we don't always agree, but I do believe that he values and appreciates our voice more than other administrations have in the past. Um, and I want to say, we also have Operation Breadbasket, which is the Rainbow Push Coalition. We also have the Rainbow Coalition that was, during the whole era of the Black Panther Party. And then we have the Black Panther Party. I mean, they're just such a rich history. And as you know, that I'm also a member of Trinity United Church of Christ on the south side of Chicago. That congregation, along with others, but that in that time it was the only congregation really that spoke out against apartheid in South Africa. So there's just so many different groups and coalitions that paved the way for CRS to be able to find the courage to shift its focus around organizing and policy issues. But now there are so many others that we believe that we hopefully inspired and created a framework that they have taken and have built upon it, like Asada's Daughters, Black Lives Matter Chicago, and so many others that have emerged and are basically leading the way with being vocal and present in the streets and beyond. So really proud of the work of several others. One of the things that we are doing, yes, locally, national, but also globally, um, really paying attention. I mentioned Dr. Delk was in Chicago when Trinity United Church of Christ was speaking out against apartheid, dared to have a sign that says Free South Africa when many were afraid to do so. And so they spoke out against apartheid and the acts of violence against the humanity of South Africans. And we are doing the same with respect to Palestine. We have hosted delegations to Palestine to learn from the Afro-Palestinians and communities there. And we continue to be in solidarity with that work. So again, it's a full circle opportunity. And what we've realized is even when we are talking about immigration rights and advocacy work, if we're talking about police accountability, it doesn't matter. We'll always see someone with a kafia in solidarity with Palestine. And so what we are making sure that we're being mindful with our congregational based members, because we are first and foremost a faith-based organization at the intersection of human rights and social justice. We want to make sure that our congregational members understand the importance of being intersectional. That we cannot call ourselves Christians, we cannot call ourselves followers of Christ, and we ignore the suffering of even one in the diaspora. And so for us to be able to continue to build solidarity, it must go beyond the local scene, but we must also make sure that we're understanding how the suffering in the world directly impacts us here in Chicago and vice versa.
I appreciate that very much, Sister, because um, knowing a bit of your background, I, I know the work. We travel the world together, and I am I think very fondly of our trips and our time together, and some of that work, what it introduces you to, is what we have in common, right? That suffering. Cornel West says it like this. He said, suffering leads us into these discourses and dialogues that actually helps to redeem our humanity. He has some, he's so much more articulate at saying that than I am, and yet what I know is that if we can link the suffering here and understand how suffering then relates to the suffering of folk in other spaces and places, the experiences of other folk. Then we could then work together, you know, those of us here in the United States, you in Chicago, here I'm here in Hartford, you in Illinois, I'm in Connecticut, and yet how that links to the suffering of our people throughout the diaspora, whether that diaspora that diaspora lives in Brazil, like we have been in relationship to, or where that diaspora lives in Palestine, Israel, or how that diaspora lives in West Africa, or how that diaspora lives in the UK, for that matter, right? That our peoples are all over, and that we're linked together. Dr. King said it best. We are part of this mutual garment or fabric of destiny. That what affects us, one here, it affects us all. And I find it odd that in some versions of Christianity that gets lost, when I think that was a center and central to the gospel as I understand of our elder brother Jesus.
Absolutely. I mean, what you're saying brings to mind, you know, a brother and sister, Angela Davis and James Baldwin. Angela Davis, and I paraphrase, and suggested that we cannot be serious about Black liberation in America if we're not concerned about the liberation of the Palestinian. Um, but I'm pretty certain that in addition to the Palestinians, she was speaking to the struggles in the diaspora, but she understood that the Palestinian struggle was not far removed from that which we face as Black bodies in America, where militarized policing is a so-called tactic, land grabbing, disinheritance. All of those issues impact our communities. But James Baldwin also said that if they come, for me in the morning, surely they'll come for you in the night. And we cannot live our lives thinking that, well, that's them over there. It doesn't impact us. Eventually, they'll come knocking. They won't even come knocking. They'll just come. When I look at Palestine and I see the criminalization of their young children, it's the same thing when I see the the prison industrial complex here in the U.S. Um, you know, just making our children out to be demons, and they're being charged with their own death, their own the murder that was inflicted by police and the state. And so I think that if we look closely, we'll be able to see those common ground. When we took our first delegation to Palestine, what we did was we took folks around the issue of water justice. We had folks from the Dakotas, Black Lives Matter activist, organizer, and and students from Howard University. And we were looking at Flint, Michigan, looking at the water protectors in the Dakotas, but also looking at the ways that water was weaponized in Palestinian communities, where the occupying Israel state would turn off the water, turn off the sewage. You're talking about women trying to give birth without water, people trying to exercise hygiene, good hygiene, without water. People thirst without water. And so looking at the power of the water source and how that could be used and abused to continue to inflict pain and marginalization and suffering. And not only to mention like the crops, the sacred olive trees, being able to care for your crops. So livelihoods were removed. And when we look at Flint and we look at the impact that it had on the health and welfare of children, their growth and development, and the implications from not having access to pure water, we see the common line. We go to the Dakotas and we see the government willing to pump oil through sacred lands, literally through the burial sites of their ancestors. Is how dehumanizing is that, to say that you are nor your ancestors matter, that the wealth of pumping oil is more important than your humanity. And so we were able to make these connections. And I liked what you said earlier. It's my hope that when those students return to their respective places, that when they saw Palestine on the news, when they saw Flint on the news, when they saw the Dakotas, the water protectors on the news, that they saw the common thread, that intersectionality, and said, that is my family, that is my village. And I am nothing apart from them. Their struggle is my struggle. Mm-hmm. And that is really, personally for me, my hope and vision for Community Renewal Society. I love the fact that the founders did not make it Chicago Renewal Society or specific to a region, that they had the vision to say Community Renewal Society. And community could be so vast if we allow ourselves to be inclusive and welcoming to all.
Yeah, it is about. I'm reading a book that is considering what it means to matter, to matter. It's called Mattering, Mattering. My ebonics gets in the way sometimes, so T's become D's. But and one of the premises of this book is to talk about I'm in higher ed, so I spent some of my life on a college campus, but in the context as an administrator in higher education, So community and belonging, that those are all the hot. That's you talking good when you can talk about community and belonging, and yet one of the keys to belonging, in my opinion, is not just being a part of, right? That is important, but also mattering or mattering. I'm trying to correct it, Waltrina. I'm trying, Reverend. I'm trying. What it means when, if I am not there, will I be missed? That part of belonging, for me, is what the writer of this book and what I'm starting to think about. When you're not there, will you call me? Am I going to be missed? Do I have a spot? Was somebody saving a seat for me? Back in the day, at least where I come from, your crew, my peeps, they would, if I was running late, somebody would save a seat for me, right? Right? So that kind of gospel song, when you get to on the other side, save a seat for me. Jesus, save a seat for me, right? Right. What does it mean to matter? Right? We say, Black Lives Matter, right? And of course the alternative to that was that other phrase, right? As if to say, do I matter does not mean you don't matter. It in fact, to say do I matter is a placeholder for all of us, quite frankly, for any individual to matter, so that if I were not there, would I be missed? And that's the question ultimately of, here's another buzzword, inclusion, right? Right? Yeah, to be brought a part of. So this mattering for me is extremely important. And how, I'll say it this way, I'm a part of my personal project and ministry is to how do I create the conditions or cultivate the atmosphere for folk to contribute what they have to contribute. It is not, for me, it is not so important that me and mine get whatever it is we're trying to get, but that in my getting, do you get, right? In my having, do you have? It's gotta be. I love this. You named it. Our foreparents in naming CRS, they centered the community, right? That which we have, the common union, the common unity, that which we share, that make us one, right? And e pluribus unum, we have that on our monetary bills and whatever. But what does that actually mean, and how do we actualize that in ways that in real time, especially when, and I love this that you said earlier, especially when we don't necessarily agree, right? And agreement, literally, we may not agree. Well, I can't say, I was getting ready to say something that I don't actually know if I believe myself. But what I hope is that our common humanity is what needs lifting up, right? How we get there, there are multiple roads. And just because you're on your road and I'm on my road doesn't mean we're working counter to that overall goal of the uplift of all of our humanity, right? So part of your work is around. I know in my time at CRS, we talked about. We didn't use this phrase, but today we're talking about economic inequality, justice. We talked back in my day at CRS. It was race and poverty, right? Those were the phrases that we use today. And I know you all use this phrase, just economy, right? Right. Talk a little bit about the work that centers around how you do that work in today's ministry and work.
Well, I mean, I don't want to miss something that you lifted up when you lifted up matter. I think that is a very important piece, and I'm happy to come back to the economic
Sure.
justice piece, but I just think it's a very sacred uplifting, and I don't want to miss that moment, because when we think about matter, we think of substance, we think of body, and when those brilliant sisters, to honor Trayvon Martin, came up with this concept of Black Lives Matter, um, it definitely was to affirm the humanity of all Black bodies, to recognize that the body matters, um, that we are, a valued matter in the greater scheme of this universe. They were, I don't know if they knew it or not. I'm pretty sure they did. They're brilliant sisters, but they were also recalling the concept of Ubuntu. I am because we are, and Ubuntu is intersectional, where it speaks to, not only the human, matter, but the spiritual beings, as well as our connection with, creation, all of creation. And when we consider the roots of African philosophy, religiosity, and the like, this whole concept of honoring the body, honoring the human matter, is a very sacred duty and responsibility. Thus, we pour libation, um, recognizing that we have ancestors at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. We have ancestors whose bodies, were lost, in the strange fruit, the wind, the trees, and beyond, bodies that have never been recovered. But we still honor their humanity. We still claim that they matter. And so before we coined the phrase Black Lives Matter, we poured libation. We played the drums to summon those who want to, um, pursue liberation, um, or even as drastic, if one may say, or as, radical as to say, your bodies matter so much that I would rather throw you overboard and let the Atlantic Ocean have you before I allow you to go into a life of enslavement. Um, Before I be a slave, I be buried in my grave, because we understood the power of that term matter, that it's a substance that's far greater and spiritual than, um, just, hey, this BLM. No, this is the sacredness of the body, and I think those who aim to oppress us understood just how sacred the body is, that the matter of the body was, because that's why they did work so hard to control it, to make us think that we were not worthy, so that they would profit from it. And so I think it's brilliant to explore this concept of matter, because it has always been relevant, to who we are as people of African descent. Our ancestors have always dignified, um, the body, by pouring libation and being respectful, to those who came before us, even those whose bodies, we do not have physical access to. So I just want to affirm and celebrate that as well. But in terms of the economic, efforts that we're lifting up now, it is not one of our largest platform issues, but it is certainly integrated in our everyday work. We understand that we cannot talk about, true liberation, as long as we are suffering through poverty, that's imposed by the state. And so we recognize that when we're talking about the economy, when we're talking about the divestment from our schools, from the SNAP programs, from healthcare, and other issues that have a direct impact on our livelihood and our well-being, and our children being able to get education and to further themselves, that all of that is connected to socioeconomic divide. And so when we look at the prison industrial complex, and folks are not, even though the governor just recently signed a bill that would allow people to have their records cleared after a certain period of time once they're released, that is progress. And we certainly celebrate and lift that up. But when we look at all of these societal issues, there's nothing that we can look at and not be able to follow the money and see how it's interconnected. Excuse me. Excuse me. Pardon me, my allergies.
Bless you.
Thank you, my brother. And so, in such, we find ourselves lifting up the economy. We find ourselves calling out these injustices and being able to make that connection. And that's also why it's so important for us to be engaged with welcoming the new neighbor, because we also understand, this crazy concept of pull yourself up from the bootstrap. Well, was it Muhammad Ali or Malcolm X who said, well, how do you ask someone without shoes to pull themselves up from their bootstraps? And so I just think it's really important that when we look at those three evils that Dr. King lifted up, and I also add Angela Davis, the fourth, which is sexism, that we realize that we cannot speak to one without the other, that they're all integrated in our efforts to bring liberation to all.
You were in my head. I was thinking just that. Here, 60 years later, Dr. King says there are these triplets of evil, right? That you can't really tease one out without the others coming along. And I think Angela Davis is absolutely correct, that the work that we still have to do that's linked to sexism is linked intrinsically with racism and militarism and materialism. They are linked together in such a way we can't talk about one without the others coming along there with it. And in fact, they're a package deal. So for me, it's very easy to go from a conversation around police accountability that has race at the center of it, right? When then, in fact, if we're talking about the violence that exists within the context of race and police accountability, all of that's there together. I'll say it like this. I don't know nobody. This is just me. None of my people that's out here hustling, and however you understand that, they hustling because they ultimately there's some economics that's driving that hustle, right? From putting Pampers, baby mamas needing Pampers to big mama needing a nice place to stay, to in fact try that hustle, because there ain't no jobs in the neighborhood. There's no access to living wages, etc. And so for me, some of what needs to be centered has to be about, it ain't rocket science. It just isn't for me. And so I think your advocacy through the policy work that you continue to do, and I know I've done that in the past. We center around that legislatively, the stuff you supported at the state level, which is stuff we didn't do during my time at CRS so much, but that you all have taken on and have forwarded and made those linkages to supporting policy work at the state level and at the local level. And let me just say this: that's where it's at right now. While we are in somewhat of a kind of a national free fall, in my opinion, around some things that if we are to focus our work, it's got to be at the local level. It's where we are. It's where the people are. It's where the people, at the end of the day, of all of our policy making and our law making and our law rendering, is people. People at the end of that. People will in fact be impacted by that. We have done due diligence, I think, Reverend Waltrina, in this kind of hour of conversation about the work that you're doing in Chicago. Do you have a final word? What would you say? Here we are in this moment that is we're tasked to lift up a way for a faith filled and faithful way forward, even in the context of so much despair, so much, yeah, so much trouble, right? I'm leaning into a gospel song. I'm so glad the trouble don't last always. Right there, right there, right there, right. So what would you say to the folk who are listening to us this evening and who will listen to this podcast and in the future? What would you say to them in this current moment?
I was joined the many who watched the Super Bowl this past Sunday, and in the background, as that what is his name? Is it Bad
Bad
Bunny?
Bunny.
Was performing. He had the quote, which I'm pretty sure was borrowed from Dr. King as well, that um, love is greater than hate, um, to that effect. And but I would also add courage, because it doesn't take a lot of courage to be racist, to be a bigot, to be hateful, to try to cheat and steal and to disinherit communities. But it takes a lot of courage to say, I'm willing to sacrifice something so that we all have access to the tree of life. It also takes a lot of courage to love, and to love deeply beyond the superficial, but be able to find our common thread, as you've quoted earlier, that intricately connects us. And so I think, for me, those have always been the pillars that sustain me and push me when I find myself um, afraid to step out, to speak out, or to dare to be prophetic. I can't tell you how many times I have stepped into a pulpit to preach and I wrote something and then I start to freak out like, can I say this? Can they hear this? Can they receive this? And I want to pull out my pen and start editing. But then I was like, no, you speak the truth that has been given to you, that you have witnessed, that needs to be spoken. And so I move forward, and I try not to be afraid of the consequences or of the judgment and the like. And in order for us to be able to um, pick up this bloodstained banner that our ancestors had carried and passed on to us towards freedom and liberation, we have to be courageous, and we must not lose sight of the principle and the power of love. And it sounds cliche, but it really is our power. It really is what um, uh, it really is our secret power. It's our secret weapon, if you will. And Ruby Sales, once said, or I heard her speak on um, this whole concept of being an ally. She's like, you can't be my ally. You can be my comrade, but you can't be my ally. Because for you to be my ally suggests that you are able to help me reconcile in my humanity. But in essence, those who are oppressed, we're the ones who are able to help you to affirm your humanity because of the suffering that you have and your imposed against others. And I always not struggle, but sat with that and wondered, like, wow, that's pretty profound, Mother Sales. But what she's saying is, we have to be able to take, particularly those communities that have a history of oppressing and marginalizing others, be able to be courageous enough um, to say that my community has harmed others. What am I willing to sacrifice? And also, how am I able to use my platform courageously to be able to be transformative in the spaces where I am? I'm pretty sure she could break it down a lot better than I did, but I've carried that with me. It takes a lot of courage to be able to not see yourself as this savior, but to say, I can learn, and I can also make some sacrifices, and I can also use my privilege and power to do good in the world. But also, as people who have been oppressed and who still face oppression or marginalization, and who are being minoritized in many ways, we also have to be courageous enough to stick together, to not allow um, these different entities like commercialism and so forth to be able to divide us. We've got to be able to find ways to stay unified, because our ancestors would not have survived the Ma'afa if there was not that unity and that love, even on those God forbidden ships, in the brush arbors, those secret societies that were able to sustain them, and they were able to draw from the Ubuntu. So courage and love is what I would offer up.
All right. Thank you, sis. You know, we send our love and support to you, man. The work that you are continuing to do there in Chicago, and of course throughout the state and the country and the world. And thank you for being willing to be with us through all of the technical difficulties. We made it through, sis, and I appreciate very much. Look forward. I hope to be able to invite you back in the near future to have further conversations on this order. Listen, folks, we are endeavoring to do what we believe God has called us to do, to bear witness to the suffering of peoples, because in fact, Dr. King said it best. Suffering is redemptive. There's something that helps us save ourselves, if you will, right? And so it is in these spaces and spaces, Reverend Waltrina and myself and many of others of us are doing the work that we or have been led to do in order to do such in this time, in the way that we see it. And thank you for your leadership, sis. Thank you for your continued witness. We're family, you know that, and holler at me, call me when you need, and I'm certainly gonna call you back when I need. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you, and
can I thank you for the foundation that you have created for CRS? Leading the policy and organizing work, and being able to, alongside the leadership of Dr. Delk, create the space that we have today. So I'm very grateful to you for your legacy and rich contribution to this history of this organization. So please also give my love to your beautiful queen, and thank you for the gift and honor to join you tonight. Thank you.
it will do. And oh shucks, I did just a little bit, but I appreciate very much. It was one of the joys of my life. I tell people all the time, I lived in that town just south of heaven. Um, and that was Chicago, Illinois. To be there for the time that I was there, it was an exciting time. There was lots of movement, and I look back on it now, almost 30 years later. Wow. To say, and there are places now I go back, and when I come back to visit, I be, boy, how come I didn't spend more time doing that over there? Because I was doing the stuff I was doing, right? So I know the answer to the question, but but there were so many things I didn't get a chance to do. There was there was so much rich history that I didn't even get a chance, that was in my neighborhood, that I didn't get a chance to mine out, like I now look back and say, man, I was right there. I could have. But anyway, it is the continued work of seeking what is right, what is good. I'm reminded of the scripture: whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are of good report, whatsoever things are just. Paul said, think on these things, right? It is that which we strive to do. Thank you, Reverend. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Love to you and yours as well. All right, God bless.
Bye bye.